pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Jerome,
Here.
Ms. Hope,
Here.
Ms. Tillett, Mr. Rolfson,
Here.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Mr. Crail,
Here.
Mr. Massey.
Here. Thank you. It's time for the public to come and speak on any item that is not on our agenda. And they have 3 minutes, and when you come up, please state your name and address. And I have I got 3 cards. I got a couple cards first. Unless yours is one of the cards.
No.
No, okay. Edward Zink. We're trying to make this quick for everybody. They already know. Okay. Just hand we'll pass around.
We can pass them down.
I don't know if anybody else would like to.
Edward Zink, 209 West 8th Avenue. Tonight I'd like to talk about living in Mount Dora. There's a few things that I want to go through fairly quickly. I realize that I only have 3 minutes, so hopefully we can get through this quickly. This started on October 28th. This was kind of the day that I had a little bit of frustration. Got home at 9 o'clock in the morning, had a car parked across my driveway. It took 5 hours for the tow truck to come and get the car out of my driveway.
Could you please just address the city council, please? Thank you.
Along with that, there's a lot of situations that it seems to be that there's a lot more festivals than what there used to be. And I've spoke to several people. In further investigation, it's found that there's some section 74.2.10 streets, sidewalks, and other public spaces. If you can jump to page 5, there's a highlighted area. It starts with furthermore. It is the policy of the city of Mount Dora that city facilities are for the enjoyment of the public and not for commercial enterprise. The regulations which follow are an attempt to find a balance between the individual public user and the organized user. If you skip a little bit farther back to the next page, 6, there's an area that's identified as cornerstone events. And there's 8 of those events identified. To skip to the next page at 7, it very clearly states no more than a total of 15 special event dates in any single calendar year for non-city sponsored special events. If you go to page 2, I have highlighted the cornerstone events. And the total amount of events in 2017 were 35, and the total in 2018, as it stands, is 33. And it shows that it exceeds that requirement that's listed. It's difficult living in downtown with constant gridlock. And when I read these pages and I see the words, the regulations which follow are an attempt to find a balance, it means that I think someone has dealt with this issue previously. And when you do the 8 city-sponsored events with 15, that's 23. That comes out to be about 2 events a month. That's it? 3 minutes? I guess I'm done.
We have all the information here.
We have the information, so it'll be.
Okay, one thing. Would there be any type of a follow-up for that? there's someone that I could meet with.
Ms. Robin, our city manager.
Okay.
And talk to her.
The other topics, they're self-explanatory.
All right, thank you very much. Christina Buchanan.
Hello. My topic actually has to do with Christina Buchanan, 736 Shirley Avenue, Mount Dora, Florida, 32757. So, mine are the dumpsters. So the dumpsters are unacceptable. They are covered with turkey vultures, their droppings, and let's not leave out the rats. For those of us that live downtown, this is an unacceptable situation and something needs to be done. A simple solution is to enforce the rules which are possibly already in place to keep the dumpsters closed at all times. This is a goal and it's attainable and it can be monitored and regulated. It's my understanding that a number of the merchants, I'm not sure about this, share the cost of the dumpsters, but fines can be imposed. They can start policing themselves to make sure the dumpsters are kept closed. If the dumpsters are too small for the group of merchants assigned to them, then they are constantly overflowing. I request the city manager to reevaluate the locations and to increase the cubic yard capacity at those locations. Pertaining to the turkey vultures, there are a number of humane methods to get rid of them, which comply with the 1918 Migratory Bird Treaty Act, maintaining a cleaning program to remove their droppings. Bird spikes, bird spiders, wires, predatory eyes, and statues of owls are just to name a few. Turkey vultures, rats, garbage smells coming from the dumpsters, bringing down property values and making us, that live in downtown, not so happy at times. So, I'm going to make a formal request, a complaint about the dumpsters near Pisces, due to the fact that on March 1st at 5 p.m., the stench coming from the dumpsters was overpowering and absolutely disgusting. Per Code Ordinance Chapter 54, Health and Sanitation, Part 5, Objectable Odors, it states that 5 people from different households within 90 days of one another make a complaint with objectable odors. Issues can be taken, actions can be made. Let me be the first to actually do that. The dumpsters were open and overloaded and overflowing and absolutely gross.
Thank you.
Rosa Farrar.
Right here.
Farrar. Did I pronounce that right?
Good evening, Rosa Ferrer. I live at 735 Shirley Avenue. I have been a resident of Mount Dora for 5 years, and I am very interested in what's going on. I want to talk about the boat ramp and the rat business, the rat infestation. Requesting City Council to review restricting boat ramp parking to city residents only. See attachments, and Ed gave you those, okay? This will provide a safer environment for our residents during use, will assure availability of our residents to use, will increase the value of all city residents' home, whether you own a boat or not, and will contribute to revitalizing city properties. It will help to justify potential buyers because of our high taxes versus buying just outside the city. Will reduce traffic and parking downtown, and it will assist with the city master plan by eliminating the needed cost of building more vehicle and trailer parking. Okay, that's that. Now I want to add to Ms. Buchanan's statement, and it has to do with what I call the public health threat. I'm a U.S. public health officer, retired, and worked with CDC and did a number of objective and also subjective studies. But anyway, the public health threat of the rodent-borne diseases. Rat bites and scratches can result in rat bite fever. Rat urine and feces are responsible for leptospirosis, which can result in kidney damage and can also be contracted through the handling and inhalation of urine and feces, and complications include renal, liver failure, as well as cardiovascular problems. Other illnesses that the spread of rats, and we know that the rats, whatever the vultures drop, the rats eat, and then we have the infestations, is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, Lassa fever, leptospirosis, lymphocytic choriomeningitis, plague, and rat bite fever. Transmission can take place when people touch or breathe dust from where these rodents leave their droppings or urine. Primary infection prevention is rodent control, which can be achieved by closing the trash bins so that food from the restaurants is not available to the rodents. And I will, let me submit my, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public wish to speak on any item not on our agenda? Go ahead.
Michelle Middleton, 311 North Grandview. I just want to say that this weekend in Donnelly Park, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there is a pop-up mini golf course made by local companies and businesses and artists, and it's only $5 to play, and it benefits the Mount Dora Center for the Arts. I think this is a great new thing that's come to town, and I encourage everybody, all of council and the members of the audience, to come out and have a little fun and support our local Center for the Arts.
Which date and time?
It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
State your name and address, 3 minutes, please.
My name's Phil Goby, live at 230 North Baker Avenue. Wasn't really planning to come speak today, so I'm not very prepared, but back to the boat ramp parking, and where I've lived previously, we have stickers that you purchase that gave you the entitlement to park there, which if we did it only for residents, it would enhance the community for us instead of having a facility for the surrounding communities, which would be of interest to me. That and the parking issue in relation to the events that we have. It seems like when they did the Highlands festivals and they were down at the park, all the crowds are down there. The parking isn't nearly as bad of an issue, and at night the merchants or the restaurants in town are busy. During the festivals, the big festivals, the downtown's shut down. All the restaurants are empty. There's no live music. The place is a ghost town at night. Whereas when the festivals are outside of the actual downtown and the surrounding parks, the downtown's vibrant. The businesses are doing more business. It seems to me, anyways, that they're busier and the restaurants are happening and there's live music and stuff where there isn't when the festivals are in town versus the surrounding parks. There's it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
That's the speaker, Rosa.
Rose or Tina? Is that yours?
No.
Thank you.
Second. Seeing none, we have some, pardon? No.
I didn't do that.
No, there was, our attorney's making a point. Anything presented to the city council as something like that is a public record. So anything that was up here.
Have Lisa take a picture of the boards?
Yeah, we gotta take a picture of the boards.
One board.
Can they take a picture of the
Lisa's doing it. It has to be.
Okay, we're going to do that now. So,
However she gets it.
okay,
Got it?
thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. So, right now we're going to do a swearing in and a pinning ceremony for a new police officer.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. John O'Grady, Public Safety Director. It's my privilege to bring forward Officer James Hughes, and we will bring his wife Kate as well. And it's like a double ceremony. I noticed today Kate is pregnant, so I do notice these things. I'm a police officer. I'm supposed to be but Officer Hughes was born and raised here in Central Florida, the Ocala area. He was raised by his mother, Sherry, who's here with us. And I get to review everything that they go through, their psychological and everything like that. And I'll just say James had a very varied upbringing where he saw a lot of things that a lot of us don't see. And as I looked at his information, I said, you know what, he is going to make a perfect officer. And so I asked him, I said, why do you want to be a police officer? And he wants to give back, which sounds cliche, but once you get to know James and everything that he's been through with his mom raising him and things like that, I truly believe it. And I think Mount Dora is blessed to have an officer like this and to bring Kate and James into our family here at Mount Dora. So, Mayor?
Okay, if you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James Hughes,
I, James Hughes,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, protect, and defend
that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the state of Florida,
the state of Florida,
and the charter
and the charter,
and ordinance of the city of Mount Dora,
the ordinance and charter of the city of Mount Dora,
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
domestic or foreign,
domestic or foreign,
and that I will bear true faith,
and I will bear true faith,
loyalty,
loyalty,
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the same,
to the same,
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
all the duties of the office
all the duties of the office
of law enforcement officer
of law enforcement officer
of the city of Mount Dora,
of the city of Mount Dora,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Sherry, come on. We have a camera, so we'll make sure you get a copy. Come on. All right, talk to the midnight shift.
You're a rabble rouser. You're a rabble rouser.
One other presentation. Mr. Massey, would you come forward, please? Mr. Massey recently completed a course given by the Florida League of the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials given by the Florida League of Cities. And I think most of us on the council here had that opportunity to attend those. And congratulations on a successful completion of the first phase of your training.
Thank you very much.
Here's your certificate.
Appreciate it.
Okay, can I have the approval for tonight's agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Consent agenda, we have two items, and both are minutes, and can I have approval for the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, so moved. Public hearing resolutions, approval of resolution number 2018-15, the repositioning of meetings. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-15, a resolution of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, authorizing a change in meeting dates for September 2018 only to accommodate and comply with the state trim requirements of scheduled meetings of the Lake County School Board and the Board of County Commissioners, providing for legislative opinions and intent, providing for authority to the city manager for implementing administrative actions, and providing for scrivener's errors, conflicts, severability, and effective date.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hayes?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. So this memo is really to address several of the potential dates that we have that are out there that I thought we could discuss tonight. The first one being the July 3rd date is, of course, our first Tuesday of the month. It's also the evening of our July 4th event. So I just posed it as something that you could actually choose to move that one if you so desire. We can replace it with the July 31st, again, if that's council direction. The other one that I've mentioned in here is the August 7th. Actually, for that one, I will be on vacation, so I would rather be here for the meeting than rather than have one of the directors in the audience sit in for that. So That was the reason for that one. You could also replace that one, for the July 31st if you wish to keep the July 3rd. The July 28th is adding an additional one because I know from a budget perspective we'll need that, so I've just added that additional one in there. Taking into account your Florida League of Cities and giving you the dates and the fact that that's in Orlando. So I tried not to add anything during the week of the 14th, 15th, so that that does not interfere. And I know some of the other dates are earlier. I think the mayor meetings are before the regular Florida League of City dates. So I try to take that into consideration. The September dates, though, those are regulated by, as I mentioned in the memo, we must first allow Lake County School Board and Lake County to hold their meetings in reference to their trim information and in reference to their public dates. So that's the reason we propose to move it to the first and third Thursdays of the month, as well as the April posting of the fire assessment fee has some dates in there which we predate when we'll send out the information. So we want to make sure we have the dates correct before we bring that to you in April. So that's the reason we propose the first and third Thursday. Again, it's entirely up to council. We just want to make sure that with the changes that are made, that we have plenty of time to post the information on the boards, on the Facebook, on the website, to send out information and the water bill and so forth, so that we have totally informed everyone of any of the repositioning dates.
Having a motion for approval of resolution 2018-15.
So moved.
Okay.
Thank you. And any comments, questions from the council, Ms. Hopestein?
I was just gonna say, if I'm understanding it correctly, July 3rd would go away then, and we would have the 17th and the 31st.
Yes, ma'am.
And then August 7th would go away, and we would have then August 21st and 28th.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I've already noted the dates in my calendar.
Ms. Tiller?
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, we could do it we could, having, you know, the 20, I'm in August. I don't have any problem with the July, and I understand the September. The only thing I have an issue with is the August, is instead of cramming them together at the end of the month, we could also do the 14th and the 28th, which would give a week in between. And then, even though it's September would then be the following week, at least it's being moved to a Thursday. So it gives everybody kind of a little bit of a breather, and not only us, but staff as well. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I'm sorry, what are the dates for the League of Cities meeting? 'Cause I
Well,
thought
the
that
League
was
of Cities is always a Friday, Saturday, so you're talking
Thursday, too.
Thursday, so the 16th, 17th, and 18th, it's in Orlando. It's not like we have.
No, it's not. It's in
Park.
Hollywood. That was
It's
a
actually in
mistake.
Hollywood.
It's in Hollywood.
Oh, is it
Wrong
back
on the
in Hollywood? I
website.
thought it
Yeah,
was.
that was a mistake. That was an error. The League of
Never
Cities
mind.
posted the
That's-
wrong information on their
Back in
website.
Hollywood,
They
that's,
Alternate every.
They put out the 17th flyer on their website instead of
Alright.
the 18th.
I withdraw my my comment, because it would make it a little bit easier for everybody to get their stuff done,
And
so.
we'll note that it's incorrect, because I went to the website before I posted it to see where it was being held and thought that was odd that it was Orlando back-to-back
Yeah.
years, so thank
I
you.
was just told by Lynn Tiffin at the last meeting, it was after this in Hollywood.
So it's Hollywood.
Not a problem. Anyway,
That's
so
four.
any other comments, questions from council members? Okay, anybody from the public wish to comment on these date changes? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, can we have the roll call vote, please?
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Approval of resolution number 2018-17 for Fourth Avenue docks change orders. And Ms. Comfort, can we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-17, a resolution of City Council of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving change orders for construction services for the Fourth Avenue docks, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing for authority to the city manager for implementing administrative actions, providing for authority to the mayor to execute, providing for savings revision and scrivener's errors, conflicts, severability, and effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. If you remember back, I believe in July, we spoke about this initially, in reference to the fact that we would go out and repair the docks as needed. We ran into other additional problems. It seemed like the months kind of just continued on, and we continued to run into some problems. As I mentioned to you during those times when we were discussing continuing to fix the docks,
We also stated that we would bring back to you after the docks have been repaired, the change orders and any information. That's what you see before you this evening, are the repairs of change order 1 and 4, in reference to the 23,000 some odd dollars. We have gone out and made the repairs. We have inspections in place now. Mr. Peters made sure there was a program in place, a PMI program, if you wish to call it such, that we're looking at the docks on a timely basis, and that we are going down with, from a structural perspective, also checking them out more often. We did not have that program into place prior to this. So I will note that there are a couple, the 23,000 and some odd dollars mentioned in the memo may be a little different in the resolution. We'll make sure that's correct under the Scrivener's error. And the 2 change orders are referenced as attachments 1 and attachments 2. And they're mentioned in the memo as attachment number 1, so it'll be fixed as attachment 1 and attachment 2. But the date is all there.
Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Any comments, from council on this? I do have one comment, and it's what I've always had on this issue here. I have nothing against change orders. Okay, that we have to do these things, we gotta fix up those docks. My problem is that we paid a lot of money to put those docks in, and they did not last anywhere near what they should have. They didn't take any wave action. There's a lot of other things that ended up with these docks not being right. And I mentioned it before, and I don't know if we ever did, but and I feel the city somehow should take action against the company, architect, engineers, anybody else who's associated with that, and take action against them, even though I don't know if there's a statute of limitation yet, if there's any kind of insurance. You just do, I guess the old term, just do shotgun, and those pelts are going to hit somebody, but something's going to be.
Right, so you instructed staff to reach out, and I believe even the city attorney at the time was involved, and we reached out even to Mr. Colbert. Jennifer, our city attorney, actually did some research on it, and I mean, Jennifer, you might want to speak. Yes.
We looked into all those options, and we didn't find any viable options that protected warranty.
Mr. Peters as well looked into that. No, you're on it.
And we didn't find any viable options with respect to, the period during which you could go back against.
And we did file with our insurance company, but again, we were beyond the time period, but we did actually do a file with them to make them aware of that. And we reported it through HR, through risk management, reported it against the company.
But again, we have a situation here where we have floating docks, and there's an implied usage factor. Okay, if you want to call it that, you don't buy a used car if it doesn't have tires to run or an engine to run it, so you can't buy it. You can avoid a contract. So they give us floating docks which don't float. They fell apart. So there's just something wrong with this picture, and I don't know what we got to do in the future here as in our public works and everything else to protect ourselves. Anything that we do in the public works, we have these performance insurance, what do you call them?
The performance bonds.
Performance bonds, right. That we can go against, which usually lasts, quite a few years, okay, under performance and warranties and whatever.
And now your contracts do have that. They've had that now for the last year.
Okay.
But prior to that, they did not make, it was not included in there. So they are in there now.
Okay, that's good. So these three.
Question, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Does Florida have a discovery regarding statute of limitations? In other words, it begins with the time of discovery. So if we didn't find out about it for 8 years, and in the 10th year, before the 10th year, we finally find it, we would be within the statute of limitations in order not to have that as a defense. Do you know what that
I think
says?
we looked at the tolling on the discovery. I think it was expired, but I can verify.
Could you just, do it now, but just check on that, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, I mean, we did, I'm pretty sure we already looked into that, but I'll double check.
Okay.
It's been several months since we looked into it before. I wanna say it's more than 6, but.
So if our discovery was within the statute of limitations, that's not a defense they can raise. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else from council wish to address this item? Anybody from the public wish to address this item? I see none. Ms. Jones, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Approval of resolution number 2018-26, municipal impact and operating fee study. Ms. Cockcroft, can we have the title read, please?
Resolution number 2018-26. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving the ranking of proposals for consultants to conduct a municipal impact and operating fee study, authorizing staff to initiate contract negotiations with the selected consultants, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing for authority to the city manager for implementing administrative action, providing for a savings provision, and providing for scrivener's errors, conflicts, severability, and effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Haynes?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This is request for the city to actually go out and look at our municipal impact from a rate study perspective, whether it's water services or water rates, as well as our electrical services, and an impact study. So on impact fees. So are we charging the correct impact fees for our parks, our police, roads, that type of thing. So we actually opened the bid for this, went through the process, selected 2 companies. And in the RFP, there was a qualifier that stated that we could select 2 companies if we felt like that there was one company that maybe stood out in reference to a particular type of service. In this case, Litos, the engineering firm, was the firm that stood out in reference to the electrical services. We've used them for electrical rates, and we've used them in the past. And then PRMG is also a company we've used in the past for our water rate study. PRMG actually also has a contract with Oliver Tyndall, who actually will do the impact fee study. And they are considered basically the state resident experts in reference to those. So you have presented to you tonight just the ranking and the approval of the ranking and the selection. These companies all submitted a price sheet with their package, and you've part of the request here is to go back to those companies and let's negotiate that and negotiate the contract and then bring that back to you for approval. And the reason we went ahead and brought this to you tonight and held off on amending the package was so that we could get started on this, because this needs to be included in the budget. So that was one reason we also wanted to bring it to you tonight. Thank you.
Have a motion for approval, 28-26.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any comments from the council on this item?
Yes, if I am correct, the rate study itself, we chopped off on the rates was
And 3 years ago now.
3 years, it'll be 3 years ago this fall. Okay. And so when do we anticipate, will this study be completed this calendar year?
Yes, ma'am. One of them, the water study in 5 months, and the rate study approximately 4 months. And we would include these rates or the results of the study in this fiscal year's budget coming up in the 18-19. So the goal was again to get the data back so we could include it in the budget.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I support this obviously because it's not only beneficial to the city knowing where we're at, that we're fair. It's also beneficial and fair to the residents. So it's a good thing to do periodically.
Mr. Massey, did you have your hand?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I think this is long overdue. It's, having dealt with a lot of the businesses that are coming into town, the biggest thing they complain to me about is their impact fees. How they appear so out of whack with several other cities that they do business in. And this at least will give us something current, up to date, and hopefully completely fair. I think it's, like I said, I think it's long overdue, and I can't support this amendment.
Mr. Graham.
I support it as well, and I remember when we were dealing with water rates specifically a few years ago, it had been a long time, and we were considerably out of alignment on that. So, and I think I remember at the time they suggested, and we thought, something that should be done on a more regular basis. So I think these are important things to do.
Anybody else? Seeing anybody from the public wish to address this issue? Seeing none, Ms. Jones, can we have the roll call vote, please?
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. We have an ordinance tonight, the final reading of ordinance number 2018-03, the cross connection control. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Second and final reading of ordinance number 2018-13, an ordinance of City Council of City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving the implementation of a cross-connection control program in conformance with section 62-555.360 of the Florida Administrative Code, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing for conflict severability, and providing for scrivener's errors and effective date.
City Attorney, can you state the ordinance number again for the record? I believe I heard a different number than what I see on the listing.
2018-13?
-03?
Mine says 13.
It's 03. That's a typo. It's been fixed on the, when it needs to be signed, I believe.
Okay, well then it's 2018-03, my copy says 13.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
I have a motion for, thank you, and Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor. We brought the first reading to you, and we had some discussion about the cross connects. And Mr. Peters gave you, I think, a lot of information. Since then, we've reached out to the Lakes and Mount Dora, to the community. We have come to the conclusion, and Mr. Rodowski's in the audience somewhere there. Yes, thank you. So he can step up if I misspeak. By all means, Mr. Rodowski, we've reached out to the community, and we've realized that we do not need to do anything with the pumps out there. That is not anything that's even going to be considered. The pumps, the Hoover pumps, will still be run by the community, administered and handled by them, and we're good with that. What we will do is, as per the ordinance, it's very restrictive in the sense of what it states. It doesn't say Lakes and Mount Dora. It says the city will do a site map, and we'll look to see, do we have any errors, or do we need to look at our cross-connection program as a whole? And that's what the ordinance reads. It's as a whole, the whole city. We spoke with the HydroCorp company yesterday and made sure that that's the direction and the goal. We talked about this last April. We started in February, and then we talked about it again in April. So we have a potential contract we'll bring back to you at a next meeting for them to be approved to actually do this site review in the sense of a full site study, and then they'll go out there and look to see what developments have complied and which developments have not, and which may not apply to. And then we will work with the HOAs at that point in time and make a decision, because at some point, if backflow preventers are needed in some of the developments, then the residents of those developments need to be involved in that process, because there's a fee to them, and there's a cost to the organization, and so forth. So this is all controlled by DEP. We have some of the state statutes listed in this package that you see before you, and we have received some notifications from them that we at least need to adopt the program. At the end of the day, we can come back and bring to you suggestions. If we choose not to adhere to their suggestions, then the city is liable for that. So if there is a backflow that's suggested and we don't go with the suggestion, that's the city's liability of if there ends up being a problem, or if we go forward and take the chance that we don't need something. So there's a lot of information that we'll bring back to you, but the ordinance before you is only implementing the program in the sense of, let us do the study, the site plan, and the study. That's it. Not in just one development citywide.
Have a motion for the final reading of ordinance 2018-03.
I move so.
Second.
Is there any other comments from the council? Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. Have there been any changes to the ordinance that was in its first reading?
No, sir.
Thank you. Second question. I know this initially was started with primarily focusing on Lakes and Mount Dora, as was mentioned in your narrative. But it applies to the whole city, and that's good, because I'm assuming the state of Florida folks would like that and not just carve out a section or two, so I support that. Just so that I know from in my district, on paragraph 2 on page 31, it talks about two major subdivisions, and it mentions the lakes and the Country Club Mount Dora. But then it also says, other than check values it'll affect, other than check valves in meter assemblies. that will apparently affect at least some of the residents in the country club of Mount Dora as well, I'm assuming.
Mr. Radowski?
Okay. I'm sorry, I was trying to find where you were on that.
That's fine. Go to page 31, it's the narrative by our manager, first page.
Okay.
And it says, in paragraph number 2, I believe, numbered paragraph 2, toward the bottom. It says, because there is no alternative water in the country club Mount Dora, cross control other than check valves in the meter assembly is not required. So meter assemblies appear to be, according to the narrative, will be required in some.
Yes, sir.
Is that a
Yes, sir, that's correct. In a situation where you have what would be designated as high hazard, which would be potentially where you have a higher pressure on your reclaim line than you do on your potable water line, you would have to make sure you have the adequate backflow prevention put in place.
Yeah, all of our water in the country club is potable except for some of the
Right,
irrigation.
yeah, right, and that would not be considered in the country club, that would not be considered a high hazard situation.
Very good. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Any other comments? Mr. Grill? Seems like we-
No.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe, Mr. Radowski, if irrigation at Country Club of Mount Dora is a separate system from the potable water system, is that different? Like some other-
No, they are separate systems, and the issue at hand with the cross control program is to make sure that if there is any inadvertent connection between the two systems, see, that's what we have to prevent from happening. And it can happen actually quite easily if somebody's not careful. It can be done inadvertently with somebody who's trying to enhance his irrigation system in his, in his landscape, and he might, a do-it-yourselfer who doesn't maybe know a whole lot, but he can connect some pipes together, can certainly cross the reclaim line when he's trying to connect it in. He'll connect it into his potable water line, and then we'll have a cross connection in the system. So that's the issue. We can have them connected up, but they are, to answer your question, if I understand it, they are two separate systems, and they need to remain two separate systems.
I think he was asking the difference between the country club and Lakes of Mount Dora.
Oh, okay.
The
I
difference
apologize.
between those two.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, in this situation that we have there in the country club, first of all, does not have. Do we have? I'm trying to remember if we actually have reclaimed water running through the country club. From what I was looking at, we don't.
No,
we don't
no.
have that. So there is no potential for a cross connection in the country club. That's the situation we have there, because there's not any reclaimed water in that area. I apologize for the misunderstanding.
That's fine, and just follow up on Mr. Creel, since I live in the same place, and I just need for the DEP or an engineer to show me, literally show me how these two systems can be interconnected.
It can happen very easily.
Oh, I know it's not easy, and you're talking, the way you're talking, somebody's got to physically go out there, dig up the water line.
Sure.
And go into it and tap into it and use their city water, which I'm going to tell you right now, there's not one person in Lake of Mount Dora that's going to go through that kind of trouble to go spend money on the watering to pay the water, the city water, versus the reclaim part, because our reclaim is paid by the association through our dues. Okay, so this is, and I know what you're all saying, okay, but somebody needs to prove this to me before we make a whole association, make a whole community pay for something that is just because some bureaucrat says we should have it, okay, and that's, I'm just griping me out this whole thing from when it started a couple years ago, and it's just irritating to me from that standpoint that we're, that this thing is just still being, and I realize there's always the possibility, but.
I think HydroCorp mentioned yesterday, just so that you know, one of the examples he gave of a similar community was that if your pump that you're watering the yard with, that's irrigation, if you lose the prime and you hook
your hose to your potable on the house, and to flush the pump or to bring the prime back up, and I don't know if that's the
We're
right
gonna have
wording.
pumps out there.
That was one way that he stated that it could happen, so I apologize, but we can bring experts in the future, that's not a problem.
No, we don't need to even do it here. I just like to, even for our people in the Lakes Mount Dora, to have an engineer come up there, because we have a bucket full of retired engineers up there that work on all kinds of engineering aspects. I would love for somebody to explain it to some of the engineers that we have up there in the Lakes Mount Dora. And Mr. Tucker, you have a...
No, so, Mark?
Yes, sir.
So it sounds like this can happen, but it's just an absolute long shot that, listening to the mayor speak, and it's like a worst case scenario.
Well, the cross connection control system is a protection, and the issue at hand here is that if you get a backflow situation happening, then you're going to have contaminated potable water, and the problem is, at what level do you want to take that risk? It's about protecting our residents from anything like that happening. I just read several articles. I had several articles just sent to me today of various places where cross connections have happened.
So it has happened.
It has happened, and so not only is it a regulatory issue that we have to have that program in place, and the DEP has been very patient and understanding, but they are continually asking us how we're coming along with our backflow protection program.
Can we be fined if we don't have this out in the lakes and in the country club, or?
That's one of those things, we could be, yes. I mean, if we don't have, I'll say it this way, as Ms. Hayes already said, if we don't have a general backflow protection program, all right? So, in other words, I don't want to target any one particular place or any one particular area, but we do need to have a backflow protection program, and that's what this ordinance is addressing, that we get a backflow protection program in place. And the other thing, and I don't want to speak out of place on this, but I would not necessarily want to put the burden on one small group of people.
Ms. Tiller.
Well, I think Mr. Rudowski slightly touched on what my comment was going to be. I understand from before, when Mr. Peters was just, enlightening us on this, that this was a requirement from FDEP, that we have some sort of codified, written down inspection and amelioration type of program in place in the city. And so whether it is a 1 in a million chance or a 1 in 100 chance, or whether you've got 100 retired engineers in one community and none in another, I think we need to respond to the requirements from higher authority and at least have a program. Now, what specific gadgets are required in what specific communities, I think could be, I would leave that to the knowledgeable people that we have on staff to say that this is required here, this is required here, nothing is required here, whatever. But I think, we're arguing over whether such and such is going to bleed over into such and such, and you can what if things all day long and sideways, but we need to have a program in place.
Okay, I think I was just misrepresenting my comments. I am not against the program. We have to have the program. This is by DEP. We have to have the program. What I'm basically saying is that before one community is hit with a bunch of money to do something, to make corrections, I want it very well proven by somebody that this is going to be required based on the engineering that was done originally, and to make sure we have two separate systems out there. And that's the only thing I'm saying, is that, and if it has to be done, it's got to be done. There's nothing around that, because DEP is going to say you have to do it, or you're going to shut down your whole system. But I want somebody just to say, well, Well, it's a possibility, okay? I want it to be known that it is definitely a possibility, that it can happen, okay? And we're just not speculating on a possibility.
Okay. Yeah.
Then Mr. Phil, and then Mr. Wilson.
I'm no engineer, but at the last meeting, the Hoover pumps were specifically mentioned as a problem, and now they're no longer a problem. It just isn't making any sense to me.
The same.
Has something happened in the last
No, sir,
weeks?
the same situation exists, but in this event, and the issue is the pressure differential between the privately owned reclaimed water system in the Lakes Mountain Door where the Hoover pump is, and the pressure on the potable water system. And so you're looking at about 75 psi coming from the reclaimed system and about 57 psi in the potable water system. So it would be, if there were a failure in one of the check valves or something, if there were a failure, it would overpower the potable water system. And so what this would do is, it rather than trying to control it at the Hoover pump, okay, what this would do is this would put backflow prevention in place at each connection to the water main.
Just real quick on Mark's comment. The reason we have the Hoover pumps in Lakes Mount Dora is because the city could never give us the pressure needed to run the irrigation system. So we had to install the pumps at our own expense, which was very lot of expense to do the pumps. That's when we found out we had weak scheduled pipes. The zone we built up the pressure. The pipes were all blowing around, and the main lines were blowing because the city or somebody, and when they did the inspections at the time, the wrong scheduled pipe was approved. Okay, so it wasn't strong enough to handle the pressure. So that's where the pumps are coming into play. If the city were to provide the original contract to the that was adopted with the Lakes Mount Dora, and that contract was been able to be adhered to at that time, then there wouldn't have been this issue with the pumps that we had that Lakes Mount Dora had to get the pumps. But again, it's there's two separate things here. The action down the road if necessary, and then this just having this control or this documentation into effect right now.
And I agree with that, but all of this was approved at some point by the engineering staff of the city of Mount Dora. And
I know it's just
as a citizen, I'm not interested in assuming any cost, for something 12 years after the fact or whatever. That just seems.
Is that what it is? I was going to ask, how many years are we talking here?
Yes, I believe,
I've lived there almost 11 years.
it has been about 12 years. I will say that some of the information from DEP on backflows, I asked the Hydro Corp company yesterday to give me the information. Was it 2000 and that was the time, but I think the newest report, and I believe I gave that to you, Mr. Crowell, says 2015 was when the program was enacted, a new program on backflow preventers. So the program that they are now asking that we adhere to is a fairly new program. It did not exist in 2003, 2002 when the Lakes of Mount Dora was built, but it's something they can retro and ask that we comply to. So there was a different kind of program back in that day, and that's in the copy of the data that you see. It's also online in reference to some of the state regulations on the, let me tell you what page it begins. Begins on page 50, and it's chapter 86.120, cross connection control, and it's the state statute piece, and it kind of goes back. It should talk about the year and so forth, but 2015 was a new base year. We had a report in 2016 from the city and another report in 2017, and that's when we were responding to TEP's 2015.
Mr. Olson.
Thank you. At the risk of perhaps trying to oversimplify this, it seems to me all we have before us is an approval of a required cross-connection control program required by the state, and we may be a little bit ahead of ourselves in discussing the details, which will probably come later. So I think it's just the approval of the program.
Right. Just
Yeah, I was echo what Cal said, and it could be that, if all of this happened, you know, way back in the past, and maybe the city should consider having the city pay for it instead of individual, you know, communities. I'm just saying, throwing it out there, not saying I agree with that or not, but it's something to consider.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to that part. And anybody else from the council, any other comments or questions on this one? Anybody from, excuse me, go ahead.
What I would like, that when we have to cross that bridge, is a chronological understanding of what was required about the city at that time, what laws changed at the state level by the DEP, and how did they all impact it before we were to make a decision like that, because this is probably an example of where someone above us changed the rules retrospectively, and now we're sitting here trying to figure out how to balance it all.
Anybody from the, okay, real quick, anybody else from council? Anybody from the public wish to address? Mr. Maston had your hand up earlier. Yes. Name, address in 3 minutes, please.
Mike Masterson, 7887 Crosswinds Way. I guess I got my idea perhaps from Mr. Ralston, and that is, since we're trying to, we have zero experience in dealing with this problem, this situation, and the consultant has, and perhaps the state has, because the state and the board that's going to rule on us has dealt with this. Rather than us trying to come up with a solution, we come to them with our problem and say, help us to find a solution. Since you have done this many more times than we have, had this experience in other communities around the state of Florida, help us understand what has been implemented in the past as a way to solve this problem, as opposed to us trying to brainstorm an idea where we have zero experience. And it sounds like, since this is a 2.5-year-old state mandate, there's not a lot of data. So perhaps we need to look beyond our own internal knowledge and skill set, or make it up as we go along type of idea, and reach out to the people. Okay, you guys figured this out. What's our solution? That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else from the public wish to address this issue? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, can we have the roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Crayon?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay, we have some discussion items. A draft resolution 2018-05 of the Canvassing Board. Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. As requested, I believe at the February 20th, so I don't want to misstate, but I believe it's February, okay. We discussed the fact that staff would bring back some potential, or a potential ordinance in reference to the canvassing board. And I think at this point in time, I think Ms. Johns is probably the one that would be able to explain what we have proposed to you in the attachment. And I would just point out that this ordinance would really only apply every other year. It's not going to apply the years that there's a county or a state canvassing board, because Ms. Johns sits on that board. So it's only going to apply in the off years. So it's not an annual application of the ordinance. And we probably need to make sure that, just for those who are not used to that process, that we write a whereas into this in reference to that, so it's something we can consider. But I think it takes just a few minutes for Ms. Johns to explain what we presented and how she came up with the information based on what she interpreted from our last discussion in reference to this. Ms. Johns.
What you have before you is a draft ordinance that creates a canvassing board. When the county has a election that is called by the Board of County Commissioners, or there's a special district election called and the county has to organize a canvassing board, there's no reason for us to have a canvassing board. And the reason for that is there's a Attorney General opinion that points out that since the county canvassing board has exclusive responsibility for canvassing county elections, where a city and county election appear on the same ballot, only the county canvassing board may canvass the elections. So we would only be canvassing when there's not a county canvassing board. That can be a general election, they would have a board. If their Board of County Commissioners calls for a special election, they would have a board, or if the state calls for a special election, then they would have a canvassing board, and we would, not need our own. Does that explain it?
I think. Okay, so Joe, so if we have a special election, there's a vacancy on council, and we have to have a special election. It could come up any time, so at that point, where we have to have a special election, we do not need a canvassing board for that.
No, sir. If we have a special election that's not in conjunction with a county election, or we even have an election on a regular November date that is not in conjunction with a county election, then we must have our own canvassing board.
For example, last year.
And
Past election, we had to have one.
the date of appointment on that, I had put a recommendation that at the next, and you're gonna correct me if I'm wrong with my thinking here, at the next scheduled council meeting after the qualifying date, because there's always gonna be an election, there's gonna be a qualifying date, correct? So after that is when we need it, because you only need it during, from the qualifying period, through the election itself, just for that election itself, and then it's basically disbanded, right? Until another election, so whenever we have to have one, or does it stay in force for that board?
Well, you're defining your canvassing board in this ordinance.
I know, but that can change, because they're gonna count some of the appointments.
What we did it for was one election cycle only.
Right, that's what, okay, I just saw that, that's for one election cycle. So as soon as we have a qualifying date, because you don't wanna, because the reason I'm saying that is because if we go with what the original thing was here, a member of city council who shall not be a candidate, and which I wanted to add for any elected position, okay, not just their own, if they're gonna move on to another election, does that count for anything or not? You still have to do it.
Decide. I considered putting it in there, but that would be something for y'all to decide.
Yeah, and it'd be for almost any elected position at that point.
Do you mean, in other words?
If you're running for election, okay, yeah, if we're gonna do.
Okay, so what you're saying is a member of the city council, current member,
Right.
who shall not be a candidate for, are you talking about like for state legislature or
Right.
something? Well, you would have to, I would think that member of the city council would have to resign
That would then,
No, that's
in order to
after
run
the
for
election.
other
That's after the election.
No.
that would then be a county
But if it were,
responsibility.
if they were a candidate for another position, county or state or whatever, it would not be on one of those odd
Right.
years.
It'd be a county responsibility.
Right,
And-
because it would, they would be running an election.
Okay,
before they
that's
would
why I'm
have
asking the
run.
questions, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be,
Mayor,
I'll defer this to
in anticipation of this type of discussion, Robin asked that I do a separate ordinance, which you'll find on your table. And another option that I had thrown out to Robin after speaking with the Supervisor of Elections Office is we could have the city manager appoint citizens rather than having our elected officials serve on the canvassing board. And we could base that on an application process. That takes you out of the process.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it would allow one of you to be selected as number D, a member of the city council who shall not be a candidate to be on the board. So still one member of the council would be part of that, but it would remove any other members from having to be involved in that process.
Question?
Go ahead, Mr. Ross.
Thank you. I think, as I understand reading this, the reason we can do this is because we have home rule authority by which to do that, because there's no Florida statute that regulates that and proscribes or prescribes us to do that. So it's our home rule authority that allows us to do that. There's no state law to the contrary. However, what my question is, are we adopting, assuming we adopt this, are we adopting this because the county supervisor of election wants it, or because it's necessary?
Actually, the supervisor election is requiring it,
Okay,
period.
and I'm assuming he has the authority
Yeah, it's
to do that.
necessary, yes, because it's not his obligation to conduct our elections when they don't have elections.
All right. My question's answered, thank you.
I have a comment. In the whereas number 7 on the first page of attachment 1, where you delineate the members of the canvassing board, the member from the council is not reflected there, but it is included in sub D of paragraph 2. Shouldn't the whereas include that position as well?
There's
Yes,
a
sir.
couple of versions floating around.
I made a mistake when I put the red in there.
Yeah,
It
mine
should have,
is in the original one.
it should have left one elected official and then had one citizen appointed by the manager. I misunderstood that when we spoke, so.
As far as specifically that.
Page 2, paragraph E is incorrect. Because page 2 says 2 members of the public.
It's still.
Yes, that's incorrect. It would only, there would.
One member.
I'm sorry, the mayor's trying to,
I'm sorry, one member of the public, sorry.
right.
I figured my voice carried well enough that she could.
And for the city attorney, we have, tried to put in every case that there could be a designee, so we're not at a last minute scrambling, trying to figure out how we can make sure that the positions are filled. We have 5 positions total representing no matter which, draft you use, and that would be the maximum number, in attendance.
And Mayor, considering the fact that we have a discussion here, do you have enough to redraft this, or do we have to adopt it today?
Okay, so the reason those are different, right, is because we're deciding between the two as to whether you wanted 2 members of the public versus 1, or.
That was a mistake, wasn't it?
No, it was
Whether
a
you-
choice, it was a choice she was proposing, so that you didn't have to deal with city council members who may or may not want, whether you wanted to keep a city council member on there, or whether you want to have 2 members of the public instead. That's why they're drafted 2 different ways. The original was drafted to have a city council member and 1 member of the public.
That's what I hear.
And that's still what we're proposing, the 1 council member on there no matter what. It's just the other member would be a resident or member of the public appointed by
By the
application
city manager
process.
through an application process.
Just the same way we do all boards, and I felt like application was the fair way for only those that are interested will submit an application.
I support the manager's recommendation.
Yeah, I do too. I support that.
That's right, yeah, because,
So, do we just?
You need a motion or
Leave it there
consensus?
we're just, we have to, you're gonna come back with a clean resolution, so we're just
We'll
going
bring
to,
it cleaned up next.
yeah, all the
meeting
comments are
for
being
first reading.
recorded in there, so.
Yes, sir.
It's done, so.
So the consensus is A is fine, B on page 92 or second page. Canvassing board shall consist of city clerk or designee, deputy clerk or designee, city attorney, member of the council who is not a candidate for election, and E being the fact that it would be an applicant that's appointed by the city manager and presented after the canvassing board as the language was mentioned earlier. Correct?
Sounds fine to me.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's cool.
Okay, and, the only thing maybe we just want to put in there, like maybe mention earlier on, the timing where the time of the year, whenever, if it's gonna be has to be after qualifying or something, I don't know if it has to be after that or whatever, but maybe you wanna insert that in there when you're gonna be making these appointments.
With
to go to the election
qualifying.
cycle.
One other thing to bring up
That's
that
a good
Ms.
idea.
Dawn suggested, since she's required to attend all of the meetings, should we say that she shall act as the chairperson? Because certain people have to attend some of the meetings and certain people don't, like every person doesn't have to go.
I think that would be a good idea. She's the constant, the clerk is the constant.
The city clerk. not just-
Oh, she's the manager.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
City
City
clerk, not her specifically, I mean,
Can I share something else with you regarding the election? The House bill, the elections bill regulating election dates was passed in the House. It'll be going to the Senate. I spoke with the Supervisor of Elections office today, and I just want to let our city council know that the only way that's going to impact us as a city, since we already have our elections in November, is it will require us to participate in the primary instead of a runoff. It will require that. In a city such as ours, if that legislation passes, the language we have in our charter that governs a runoff race will no longer apply. It would regulate that all cities have their elections at the same time, and we would participate in the primary, and then the general would be our runoff if we had a tie situation.
Okay, I understand that.
So that's good for us because it's not a huge difference for us. Some cities it'll affect greatly because they have their elections in March in different months.
So do we have, I'm sorry, do we have is there a set time for the primary? Is it so many weeks or months before?
August.
So basically then, our elections are gonna be in August now.
If this legislation passes, we would have a primary, but we would still have the general in November.
Well, I don't understand. Don't you only have a primary if there's more than 2 people running for a position?
No, okay, the county always has, no, you're saying every year, even golf years, there's gonna be a primary regardless, is that what you're saying? Okay. So then the qualifying period's still gonna be what, around in June?
Qualifications usually falls in June. The actual
So
primary.
that's when you appoint your,
It falls in.
yeah, that's you appoint then, you appoint your canvassing council to run the primary and the full election.
And if there are,
But who's running in the primary?
well, if there are
We don't
3
know.
council members
That's what I
running
meant.
for the
That's what I
same,
meant. If there's
then the
more than-
primary would call that down to 2 for the general.
Right. But,
Well,
but no, she
the
just said,
primary would be our election.
that's my point. The
And then if
primary
we
would be
had a
our election.
tie,
Then
then
that
our
would be
runoff
November.
would be the general
So
election.
basically, since we have rarely had 3 people running for any one position, our elections are now moved from November to August for all
If
practical
this legislation
purposes.
passes, and
Yeah.
if you don't want it to pass, I have an email I can send for you to contact legislatures.
Thank you,
as-
I'd like to
as
have
these
that, because
legis-
that just makes it crazy.
I might suggest that when it gets, this House is typically the problem of the 2 chambers, and when it's in the Senate now, they may deal with that differently, so we'll have to stay tuned as the same.
So if there's not more than, no more than 2 people running for any one seat, then our election will be in November.
No, your whole process
Our whole
will
process
end.
Process.
The whole process moves up.
Okay.
Unless you have a tie, and then you end up having a runoff in November. So instead of having our election the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November, and then having a runoff over Thanksgiving, you're now having your regular election in August. And then if you had a tie, you would have a
Have
runoff.
quite a few months of,
So you have,
council elects.
well, yeah, because if you have your election in August and individuals are elected, then they sit until November to be installed.
According to our charter would have to be
The
changed.
charter would have to be addressed then, because, wow, that, I mean,
But it all hinges on this legislation.
Contact.
So I didn't mean to open a can of worms,
Oh, it's real, it's up there.
but
It does
we're
seem
moving.
like poor legislation to me, because you want to maximize participation in any election, and by making the election an oddball August primary date, I think the turnout would be quite substantially less than if it were at a general election in November, when there might possibly be state, county, and even federal elections.
I know when there's county elections and stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, Gwen, but Ms. Johnson, is that we have, there is a lot of different seats that are elected at that primary already, and I'm not sure, is the school board one? And so that, there's a couple that are elected on the judges or some, there's some people that are elected right there on that.
You're right. I'm not sure which one's me.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be out of that process then, so, okay. So, we'll come
Well,
back with,
Stay tuned.
You know, if you really think about it, logistically, that's a real challenge then, because someone who chooses to run for election or re-election, they qualify in June, and then they'll go through that process. So if you're already seated, then you've got to start that much earlier, and your focus is there, yet you're supposed to balance with your, that's really a logistics challenge. I mean, wow.
Let me tell you what my understanding was, and it could be, obviously it's totally wrong, is the only reason for an August election is when more than two are running for the same office, for example, 3, and you need to break that down to 2, and that's done in August, and then everybody runs in November. But I've obviously got it wrong.
Well, the reason the supervisors of elections are making a push for this is because when you have an election in November and then you need to have a runoff in November, which I think is like 21 days later, there's too much room for litigation with overseas people who want to vote and be a part of that process. Their rights are basically eliminated based on the distance and the short amount of time between an election and a runoff. But that's why the supervisors are pushing for this change. What it's going to do to cities, I'll send this to you. I have a whole list from my Florida Association of City Clerks organization. I have a whole list of discussion points of why we may or may not want this to happen, and I'll forward it to everybody.
So when are you going to bring a resolution back? Next meeting or 2
Yes,
after
sir,
this
the next
meeting?
meeting.
We'll bring it back to you at the April meeting,
If the
April 3rd
legislature-
or 5th, whatever day.
If the legislature were going to make a change, it would be very soon.
Yeah,
Their session ends.
It's going less than a week.
Right.
So we'll know, what I'm saying is, we'll know what they've decided
Right.
by the time we see this.
Right, so that's one reason we'll hold off to April, is we'll wait and let this process finish and then bring you back everything at one
And
time.
remember,
It's like
time-
taking an axe to kill a.
it gives time for the governor to veto or not as well.
There's no public comment. And, okay, next item, is this all for council? Okay, great, thank you. Discussion items on the post office relocation, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In this package, you do not have a memo for that piece of the packet of discussion. I know that we had the meeting this past week at 4:30 on the March 1st, I believe. So I just really wanted to open it to the council to make comment. I did not attend the meeting. I was in a FEMA meeting, so I know we have some council members who attended, so just open it up for those of you who may not attend it.
Ms. Tillett and I were at the meeting, and because we were both there, I really didn't ask questions at the meeting. I just observed and listened. And some of my thoughts as to what I was hearing and my concerns. I understand the post office. I understand, first off, this is not a decision we make. This is the U.S. Post Office making the decision. And they've had certain parameters they put in place, and I guess they started this process a year ago. And one of their parameters is within a certain mileage area, and then the second one that they're focusing on is finding an existing building to renovate. And then the third thing I heard, and Ms. Tillett, I welcome any clarification, because we were both sitting on the opposite sides of the room listening to it. It was an interesting process, I must admit. 5 minutes, 10 minutes into the discussion, it became very clear that the presenter was very focused on one thing, and he had one job and one job only, and that was to meet the statute to have a public meeting. And in that public meeting to say he is looking for leased property and he's looking at the location. And if you asked any other questions, there were no answers to those questions. So the focus initially was up on the highway, and I guess all those things haven't worked out. So now the site they are looking at is over off of old 441 at the old rodeo building. And I had a couple of observations as I listened to that made me feel concerned. And he kept using your name, Mayor, and I knew you didn't say the things that I was hearing being said, in that we totally supported this decision and da-da-da. And so, of course, I'm thinking, we haven't discussed it up here yet, so how did we take a position on this? So I know you didn't do that. There's not a question in my mind about that. But with that said, that's how it was kind of, and as I was hearing it, it was being presented, that we were all for this particular location. The questions that the environment was not the place to answer, since the individuals there, it was not their responsibility. My concern was that we have, since 1963, because of our present location, which is when the post office was built, the trucks approached us by going through town to get there. Now, yes, they go at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever, but they come through town. So looking at the rodeo location, it's further going to have more trucks coming right through town to get there, because that's the site that they're going through. And I would hope that if we have an opportunity to redirect how the trucks get to that post office, that perhaps they consider taking new 441 and coming in on Eudora Road, since they're going to do all that new thing. But they do not receive that input in that meeting. We have 30 days to respond if we choose to, with suggestions or thoughts and things. So that was my first concern, is if we, as we talk about wanting to maintain the ambiance and the historic small town, we didn't have a choice back probably in '63. That was the best way for it to happen. But we've now grown up and we're bigger and we have a core downtown and we have everything that's happened on the highway. I guess I see this as an opportunity of perhaps suggestion they consider the Route B new 441 coming in Eudora, if indeed they decide that's the only place they can find for that property.
Yeah. I didn't really hear them say we're going to stay on the same route.
They couldn't answer it. No,
right. They couldn't answer that. So, and why in the world would a semi-truck want to stop at red lights all the way down Donnelly to make a right on 5th to go out to then have to make a left? If you're driving a post office semi, and maybe you know more about this than any of us, but you would just stay on 441 and peel off and come down 19. That's much fewer lights. You don't, I mean, there's one at Eudora or two.
Well,
when you have to make a left there and then make another left back onto 19 to double back. But I mean, I would think that could be easily worked.
Well, see,
my
that's
other observation
was
the fact that they are not now planning and probably don't ever plan to keep a small window operation open downtown, even on a limited basis. I think it would behoove us for them to at least consider that, and Monday through Friday 9 to 1 or whatever, to just have a small stamps and package drop-off type of thing, because that's one of the attendees at the meeting said, what makes every city, the core of every city, is the bank, the post office, and City Hall. And now we're going to lose one of our 3 triads. We're not going to have a post office downtown. So anyway, but
let me continue then, because I have
so
other notes here, but I knew yours was the interest of the substation, and I totally agreed with you. So it became obvious to me that we, if we so choose, need to communicate to them a concern about the traffic pattern. The question was asked about a traffic study, congestion, because again, I drive that road every day, as many of you all do, and it's not a real wide road and things, and so I'm envisioning now, if we do move the post office over there, we've moved it further away from all of our residents across 441. If they choose to go to the Mount Dora post office, they now have a much longer trip to do, and they have to figure out how they're going to navigate through town or however to get there. Whereas at the time they were looking out at the highway, it almost, even though we lost the triad, we at least were putting it to where that's where all the activity is. People could go do their thing and then go on and do their other errands. So I'm concerned about the traffic patterns and congestion, maintaining the downtown, the fact that Fifth Avenue is still one of the roads that had a surfacing done, but we still have lots of work to be done, and now we're going to have these trucks going through, and that they're looking at the location that locates it further away from a big portion of our population across 441 to use them. So that's my concerns.
Eudora, and what you were mentioning, Eudora is a good spot for them to come up and go down, because there is going to be a roundabout there at Eudora. Right there at that area for them to go in and around, go right into their place. That'd be good. Let Mr. Ralston have a turn, and then Ms. Coffey.
Mine is only thank you, Mayor. Mine is only a question, perhaps rhetorical for the council, and that is, based upon what has been said here, and perhaps additional suggestions, including from our postal expert here sitting across from me, sort of. Do we need some resolution of some kind from this city to direct or to make sure that the proper authorities get that, so we have the cities, the governmental part of the cities weighing in on that within the 30-day period? Would that help express our view?
You know, I think a memo would work, but I think,
That's what I was-
you know, it's
I'm
okay,
thinking-
but I think a memo is fine.
I was thinking a memo.
Either way is fine. Through our manager, it'd be perfectly fine to some official response.
I think we could provide a memo for the mayor to sign, that would be a problem.
Yeah, that's fine with me. You can sign it. We've discussed it, and you know what the discussion is, and you can put that in an official submission to them. Okay.
I guess the one good thing is, if it does move out there, is that there will be plenty of adequate parking. There'll be plenty of handicap parking, and I you know, it just.
But see, I didn't think that was totally answered, because if they're gonna designate 85 spaces just to the post office, then the question that we have to answer is, are there enough remaining spaces to meet what our requirements are for all the other stores that are there? When they're, now granted, many, you know, spaces aren't filled right now, but if that would be an attraction to pull it up, is there adequate parking? And I don't know, because I don't know what the ratio is required for each of the stores, but, you know, should that whole mall be filled, then what is the requirement for each one to have? And I didn't know, because they're going for 85 spaces, and they're basically going from 5,000 plus square feet to 9,000 or something.
What I noticed the last time I drove past there is that there are already, you know, all the spaces that are already have lines and designated as parking spaces. There's also a huge area behind that, which could be partially, I mean, it's blank concrete. All it does is soak up the heat right now. Those could be designated as parking places also with, you know, a can of white paint. So, but and that's all, you know, in the nitty gritty.
Well, and see, that's it, because they also are going to have to figure out and have spaces to bring in those trucks, back them in, move them, and to store all of their little vehicles.
Right. Well, that was part of their
That's
85
part of
place.
their
That was
space.
part of
Yeah.
the postal vehicles were part of the 85.
I asked that question, Mr. Salzer, on another occasion, and he basically says that when they do this kind of building, they take care of a lot of those renovations themselves. And that's what they want to make sure, that the different people who are looking at these properties were aware of, that the federal government, or not the federal government, USPS, because he says the federal government will fund them. Yes, and so anyway, that they take care of a lot of these renovations and their docks that they're going to need, and you know, things like that, and room to move in and out of those docks. And just real quick, and maybe for disclosure, since I guess he mentioned some things there, but
Rick Jerome's home.
yeah, Rick Jerome told me. Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, that's right. But you get these phone calls on your cell phones that'll say from Phoenix or different places. And you say, actually answer. I got a phone call one time from Houston, and that's where his headquarters is at, and saying that he needed some things. So I put him with Miss Hayes and Miss Johns to help out and to make our facility here available for his public meeting, instead of going around trying to find a place that people don't really know. So we made our facilities here available to them.
Is the 441 site off the plate, off the table, pretty much?
Basically, from the reason they had to go from the first public hearing, they were looking for that range of 1 mile. Since they could not come up with an agreement with whoever they were talking with at the time, and they can come up with an agreement as far as the square foot leasing space. They have their range that they have to work within. So he says now they looked at a place, like you're saying, there's a, I didn't find out, I think it was the day that he came here, which spot he was looking at. And but anyway, and I never mentioned that to anybody. So and then all of a sudden I find out that it's all over Facebook that it's that place over there. So but anyway, he says since they were looking at that spot, it's outside of that mile limit. So they then had to have another public hearing by statute to go ahead and have to increase the length of that mile. So they made it out to 2.5 miles. And I don't even know how many miles that is after that one, but it's probably well within that mileage. So now it gives them flexibility to look at that, some other retail establishments, and also that in veterinary case, they can't work out a deal with them. So that's the next step.
There's one other kind of bright spot in there too, is that I know that we had discussed investigating the possibility of making that a CR, that whole area a CRA, and having the post office would be a good catalyst for that, anchor for that, enable us to, you know, get that legislation passed through and or approved that we have another, and it might help revitalize.
And the other big
I'm
thing too,
trying to look on
I'll
the bright
just keep
side.
mentioning is the roundabout. That's going to be another area. Another thing that's when that thing is ever gets off the books and starts getting built, that's going to be a great thing for all three cities. And it's just going to be the central point of the whole triangle area that we have. And Mr. Crayon?
I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I'm not familiar with the old rodeo building.
Dairy Queen. Across from Dairy Queen.
That large building. Used to be country dancing, and then...
Not across...
Same side as near Dairy Queen. Thank you.
I think used to split off between country one week and hip hop another week or something like that.
Smorgasbord years ago.
Thank you.
And by the way, just for the council's benefit, if you want to consider, we're considering a third CRA, let's hope the legislature does not pass one of those bills that is regulating CRAs out of life, regulating the life out of them.
Mr. Tucker, the post office expert.
Okay, not the post office expert, but as an inspector, involved with some of these reviews and the like. First off, about the traffic, the trucks, they're going to take the most advantageous way to get there. The drivers, and these are probably going to be what's called contract drivers.
Yeah, they are.
So contract drivers are paid for their route. As soon as they're done, they're done. So if it takes them 15 minutes to drive from Highland through town to get there, and they're coming from Lake Mary, they're going to come right down 441, and the quickest way to get there. That's what the contract driver is going to do. So